Hi, good evening and welcome. After a hiatus of like 2 or 3 weeks, we are back. 2 weeks ago, I was in Israel for an unfortunate event. My nephew was killed in Gaza. So when I was there with the family, one of his younger brother, who is a yeshiva boy, is 18. We started conversing. And his mother, my sister, said, he teaches Tanya. I turned to him and says, really, I teach Tanya too? So I asked him, where do you teach Tanya? He said to me, in Bnei Brak. Bnei Brak does not mean much to you, but Bnei Brak is a super religious town. And people who live in Bnei Brak are very, very Orthodox, very well versed in Torah, very advanced. So I turned to him and I said, who are you teaching it to? And he turned to me and says, to older than his age people who study Torah all day. They sit in kollel. The wives work and the husband studies all day. And they share in their apartment up in heaven. They will split, you know. So they are very well versed in Torah, but yet Tanya is something they're very thirsty. So even though he's very young, he does not have that as deep as you would think. People continuously are coming to study. So I turned to him and I explained that, thank God I have a large body of students, but sometimes it's very challenging for me to translate Hebrew terms that for an Israeli or Hebrew-speaking person or Talmudic scholar are the foundation. Here we have to start not from one, but way, way before. So he said to me, you'll be surprised that as much as they study Talmud and as much as people study the Torah, Kabbalah is so foreign to them that sometimes Tanya and Kabbalah is so foreign that they need to get all the introduction, and it takes a while. And he says sometimes he starts explaining something new, and 1 or 2 students are aware, and they smile because they know what he's going to explain. He says, but the rest of them are learning it for the first time. So it made me feel a little better about our studying of Tanya. Now we're going back to the study of Tanya. In the last lesson, the first part of chapter 23, the rabbi was speaking about the commandments, God's commandments, who enabled us to become an extension of God. In a very brief way, my soul has a desire. My body parts will achieve my desire without hesitation. If I want to walk out the door, if I want to speak, if I want to stand up, I don't have to command the body parts, each part, to act their part, but rather together in unison, they are acting up on my will. That's what the body, a complete functioning body is. When God created us, he wanted us to be an extension, a body part of God. So when he wants people to study Torah, when he wants people to be kind, when he wants people to do a nice spiritual gardening around, when we follow through, we are an extension of God's body. And the rabbi went on to explain that the uniqueness of the forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is that they were a chariot to God. Chariot has no wheel on its own. If I get into a car and I want to go to the airport, I will choose the direction, either US 41 or I-75, but it's my choice. The car will not interfere or offer any suggestions. We have GPS today, but the GPS is also following my commands. That's the idea of a chariot. If the chariot will have its own mind, it will defeat the purpose for which it was created. The uniqueness of the fathers is that their entire life was a chariot for God. It wasn't about them. It wasn't about what's in it for me. It wasn't about pleasing God because I want to make God to be happy about me. It's just about doing God's will. It's very difficult. I don't know about you. I can speak about myself. It's impossible to continuously, all the time, act as a chariot or an extension of God. However, anytime we choose to be an extension of God, we become part of God. This is what we studied so far. Tonight, the rabbi is going to move on to the study of Torah, as opposed to the fulfillment of the commandments. One distinction between Torah and mitzvot. Mitzvot, I become a body part of God. So it's not God himself. I become an extension, a chariot, a vehicle that assists God in getting to his destination. Torah, in essence, what the rabbi is going to say is I am bringing God himself into me. Because when I enjoy and study God's knowledge like we do today now, we are united with God in a very unusual connection that nothing can be compared to. In fact, those who take study of Torah seriously do not have to fulfill the commandments. We will be studying, we'll discover later that there were rabbis that would pray only once in 30 days, not every day, because they took study seriously and they did not stop for other affairs, personal affairs. Therefore, between study and mitzvot, study is much, much deeper, much greater, reaches into God. And therefore, we are able to just become part of God by the study of Torah. Before we begin the study of the understanding of study of Torah, I want to share with you a short story. And that will help us understand the point of view of the Tanya. There were a bunch of Hasidim from Odessa who came to visit the Rebbe in Lubavitch, the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe. The first Hasid entered into a private conversation audience with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe, upon leaving, he gave him 10 rubles. 10 rubles as a gift. When he came out, his friends asked him, why the Rebbe gave you 10 rubles? And he said, the Rebbe asked me, how's the Hasidic community in Odessa? And I told them, thank God, people study early in the morning. There is a minyan every hour. If you're late, if you're a doctor's appointment or you had a court case or a jury duty, you can always find a minyan. If you're in need, there is a society that would lend you to start to fix your business, help with the newborn children, and we are very, very careful. We care about each other. The next Hasid that walked in said to himself, what the man before me told the Rebbe about Odessa is not true. The truth is way, way worse. If the Rebbe is going to ask me, I'm going to tell him the truth. And when he entered, the Rebbe asked him, how was the community in Odessa? And he said, unfortunately, there's a lot of lawsuits against each other. People are upset. People are trying to undercut each other. They're speaking, they're slandering. They are hurting each other. And it's a community in disarray. There's no leadership. The rabbi doesn't know how to handle the community. People are looking to start their own minyan. There is, and the Rebbe turned to him and says, thank you very much for telling me, the way it is. And he gave him 1 ruble. So the Chassid turned to the Rebbe and he said, it's not fair. I told you the truth. I know the Chassid before me told you all, excitement, and you gave him 10 rubles. But I told you the truth, and you're giving me only 1 ruble? Why? And the Rebbe turned to him and he said, when I ask you, or you, the previous Chassid, how is the community in Odessa, I know full well what's going on in Odessa. I don't need your help to tell me. And in truth, Odessa, like every community, has some parts and some people who are excellent and they excel in study and care, and they are always there for others. And there is another part of Odessa, and the unfortunate part, like every community, you must have those people who are always looking to cause trouble, disrespect, and find fault with others. When I asked you and the other Chassid, how's the community in Odessa, I was asking, trying to find out which Odessa do you live in. The first one, I asked him, how's the community in Odessa? He told me he lives in the spiritual Odessa. That's why he only sees the positive. When you came in, you told me the truth. The Odessa you live in is strife, animosity, hurting each other, competition, no respect. And that's what you get. In other words, life is, as they say, there is the reality and there is the way I see reality. We adjust reality based on our vision. The idea of the Rebbe now, he wants to make us look at the Torah from above, not from below, and realize that the Torah, the way it comes from God, is actually so perfect, it's above mitzvot. It's like the upper Odessa versus the lower Odessa. And when we connect through the study of Torah to the spiritual Torah, we are becoming part of God, not an extension of God like mitzvot, but actually part and parcel of God. And the rabbi is going to actually divide and express that in 3 different ways. The first part the rabbi is going to explain is about when I am studying Torah, I am learning what God's hobbies and desire is, and it becomes part of who I am. The second part the rabbi is going to teach us is that Torah makes me part of God and is so great, not only in the lowest of the worlds. We have discovered that there are 4 universes, and the other 2, Yetzirah, emanation and creation, are above, where angels and souls live. Even there, they need the study of Torah of ours. Because when God created the Torah, it came down on Mount Sinai. Therefore, we have that gift, and only we possess the gift. And as we'll see, the rabbi brings examples, and I'll show you some stories, that even in upper worlds, they need to come back to the Torah here on earth. In other words, the Torah assists us in living a better life, both practically and living an upper lifestyle, is not just for us living in the physical, mundane universe, but also it's effective in spiritual realms. And the last part, the rabbi is going to talk about how it affects my body. It changes who I am in the physical realm. My body will change when I study Torah. Let's get to it. Okay. We are page 313. That's where we still reached to last time. Yes or no? Well, yes or no? Yes. Oh, 3:30? No. I thought we had... The difference between the 2 levels of unity with God achieved through Torah and mitzvot, respectively, may be clarified by the following analogy. A king orders his servants to build a palace for him and draws up a detailed blueprint for it. when they carry out his wishes. They are united with his desire as expressed in the palace. However, the palace walls themselves do not represent the king's will and wisdom, but the blueprint does. And the architects who study it are actually involved in the study of the king's will and wisdom. So too in our case, the actual performance of mitzvot, although dictated by God's will, does not actually constitute this will, not so the wisdom of Torah, which is itself God's wisdom. And the halachic rulings are actually expressions of his will, and thus, when one speaks or thinks words of Torah, he attains the greatest possible level of union with God, who is one with his will and wisdom. What the rabbi is saying is, imagine a man hires a king hires an architect to draw blueprints. The blueprints are the desire of the king. The actual material, the masonry, the walls, the plumbing, the electricity, without, his will cannot be fulfilled. But it's not his will. It's what he's going to use. It's what he wants to have for, it's a utilitarian. It's for a purpose. That's the difference between mitzvot. Mitzvot are the tools or the material by which we build God a dwelling, a palace. The Torah is the blueprint. The Torah is the architectural drawing. And when I study the drawings, I actually get into understanding what the king desire, what the king wants. When the architect is able to draw based on the knowledge garnered from the king, he is able to put in writing the king's desire, the king's wisdom. Says the Rebbe. And the Rebbe is going to divide it into two parts. One is action, halacha, and the second is the actual study. When one studies Torah, one can study Torah to know how to conduct himself, to know what God's will. Another one is just to know what God desires. There are many, many parts of Torah that will never have any impact on our life. There are details in our discussions of Talmud study or Jewish law that will never happen. We studied today the Talmud, and I'm sure for many of the students of the class, they're wondering if it ever is possible to happen. The fact that, so we have here two benefits. One is to know how to connect ourselves. The other one is to connect with God's desire. This is what is meant by the statement that the Torah and God are absolutely one. They are not merely organs of the king, as are the mitzvot, but now, in other words, it says the Rebbe, mitzvot, commandments, is God's organs. When I give tzedakah, when I help the poor, when I celebrate Shabbat, I am actually become an extension of God, like an organ of God, a body part. When you study Torah, it's God himself. Now, since the divine will, which is in perfect unity with God himself, stands completely revealed in the divine soul and in its inner garments, that is, its thought and speech, while a person occupies himself with words of Torah, and there is nothing obscuring the divine will at that time, for when one studies Torah, the divine will and wisdom contained in it come into full expression in one's soul and its faculties of thought and speech, it follows that at that time, the soul and these garments of thought and speech are also truly united with God, with a unity comparable to that of God's speech and thought, with his essence and being as explained above. We studied it before, the idea of speech, and our speech is so minute, and how much more so God's speech. When I study Torah, I become part of God, of God's essence. For nothing is separate from God except insofar as his countenance is concealed. Only then Can created beings perceive themselves as distinct entities, as explained in chapter 22, since there is no such concealment? When one studies the Torah, one attains thereby a perfect unity with God, a unity comparable to that of God's speech and thought with himself prior to the revelation of speech and thought, but as they are contained within himself. We studied the difference between God's speech when he actually utters the words versus when he has them in his heart, in his mind. We discussed it before. So when I study Torah, I take God's words in his mind, and I am becoming part of it. It becomes part of my entity, my identity. Moreover, the unity, that is the unity of the divine soul and its faculties with God, that is attained through the Torah study, is even more exalted and more powerful than the unity of God's infinite light with the upper spiritual worlds. Now the Rabbi is saying, here on earth, when I study Torah, I connect to God to a much greater degree than those in spiritual realms. For the divine will is actually manifest in the soul and its garments that are engaged in Torah study, since it is identical with the Torah being studies. All the supernal worlds receive their vitality by way of the light and life derived from the Torah, which is God's will and wisdom. As it is written, you have made them all with wisdom. And therefore, God's wisdom is thus the source of vitality for all the worlds. Thus, it follows that God's wisdom, that is the Torah, transcends them all. The Rabbi is going to get a little deeper, but before I want to explain. When Moshe, we are about to celebrate the holiday of Shabbat tomorrow night. What's the celebration? God coming down on Mount Sinai. Then God tells Moshe, come back to me, so I'll give you the 10 Commandments inscribed on or engraved on stone. The Talmud tells us that Moshe, the Medrash, that Moshe, upon ascending to heaven, the angels turned to God and said, what is he doing here? He don't belong here. The Torah is a spiritual entity. He is a physical, mundane, materialistic human being. He don't belong here. And God turned to Moshe and said, give them an answer. And the simple answer that he gave them, he says, God told us in the Torah, honor your father and mother. Do you have a father and mother? The angels have no father and mother. They were created by God. So you don't have. It says in the Torah, thou shalt not steal. Do you have ever an opportunity to steal? God says, thou shalt not commit a murder. Do you ever murder? And they got quiet. The Kabbalah is asking a simple question. What does it mean they wanted the Torah not to go down on earth? If the Torah is about not stealing and keeping Shabbat and honoring your father and mother and not committing adultery, it doesn't belong to them for them to begin with. And there are various ways of, do you understand the question? There are various ways of explaining. Here is one way, the Kabbalah, that this is the easiest and the one that's connected to us. There are many ways of explaining it. The Kabbalah says that the Torah that God gave us has many layers. As we study in the Talmud, that Rabbi Akiva would be able to find 70 interpretations to each letter of the Torah, not word, letter of the Torah, and they all got lost with the 24,000 students who died in a plague. That's why we do not, there is no weddings between Passover and Shavuot, there is no haircuts, there is no partying, and the reason is because we mourn those 24,000 students. Those 24,000 students, when they died, they took it with them many of the great wisdoms of Rabbi Akiva. That's why it's the only one of two that we still mourn until this very day.
What was that?
Between Passover and Shavuot. 100 BC, 100 CE, so 1900 years ago. Rabbi Akiva himself was murdered very brutally by the Romans for studying Torah. He was one of the 10 martyrs, 10 very holy men. What's interesting is there are only two groups of people that we mourn their demise until this very day. If someone loses a father, a close relative, they mourn, but the next generation, it doesn't continue. I am not mourning great-grandfather or great-grandmother. I don't mourn them because they weren't alive when I was born. There is one that we mourn after, which is Gedaliah. Also in that same era, Gedaliah was murdered by a bunch of Jews, and there was the beginning of strife between the Greeks and the Jewish people. And the rabbis instituted that when people took the law into their own hands, is the beginning of all destruction. And that's why until today we fast, the day after Rosh Hashanah, to mourn the death of Gedaliah. There was a friend of mine once on Tzom Gedaliah, I saw him eating. I said to him, how come you're not fasting? He says to me, fast for why? For what? For what reason? I says, for Gedaliah. He says, I have 4 answers why I'm not fasting. One is, if I was killed, Gedaliah wouldn't fast for me, so why should I fast for him? Number 2, even if he was killed, by now he would be dead anyway. Number 3, he said that, I forgot, but he gave me 4 reasons. Until today, we mourn Gedaliah. The other one we mourn are the students of Rabbi Akiva, 24,000. And all the 70 interpretations to each letter, he gave them. They died in a plague. Why? Because they did not respect one another. They show no respect. And therefore, a plague broke between Pesach and Shabbat. That's why we don't listen to music. We don't get married. We don't take haircut. My son has overgrown hair. He can't count the hours until tonight. Tonight is the eve of the holiday, so you already, every day reminds me. Today already 3 times. When I'm coming tonight at 9 o'clock is dark, it says 9:05. The machine is waiting, you have to give me a haircut. The barbers are very busy in the communities that observe Torah and mitzvot now because for 7 weeks, no haircuts. The reason is because they took with them the teachings of Rabbi Akiva. In other words, the Torah has many, many layers. The way we study it here, thou shalt not steal or do not slander, we interpret it the way we live our life. But in the spiritual realms, the angels, the way they study Torah, or study about the tractate Sanhedrin, we study on the Talmud about execution, it's on a whole different realm. By the way, the Kabbalah gives us a taste of the study of the spiritual worlds of the angels. But they study it on a whole different level. And therefore, they demanded that the Torah remained in a spiritual realm and not in a physical, in this universe. What Moshe did was say to them that God wants the Torah to penetrate the lowest of the law, even thieves or people who do not respect one another and speak not nice. That's where the Torah is more effective. How do you know it's more effective? Because it's is able to change even a person who is that low. And you guys don't have those challenges. But it doesn't mean that the angels do not study Torah and their way of understanding. Why do I say that? The dispute between, and what's wrong with giving the Torah down here and they keep the Torah as well, they can study Torah. The dispute was who rules, who makes the Jewish law, the law, God's desire. And when God decided to give the Torah to us, Jewish people, he actually gave us the keys to decide what God wants. If we decide that God wants it one way, that's the way it will be, even in spiritual higher realms. And let me explain with examples. I'm going to share 2 examples. There was a famous dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and the sages. We studied it in JLI once at a great length, about an oven of achnai. Achnai in Aramaic is a snake. It's a bunch of coils. They used to make an oven instead of building it from clay, one piece. In order for them to take it apart and move it, they would make circles of clay and put sand in between and put one on top of the other. The question was, is it complete oven? Or because even a child can move it, it's not a complete oven, because a child can lift one circle, one ring, and then the second ring, and it depends. If an impure person touched it, is it impure or not? Rabbi Eliezer ruled one way, the rabbis ruled another. And Rabbi Eliezer argued with them, and he said, I want you to know that God, that's the law, that's Jewish law. And if you don't believe me, let the walls of this building, of this yeshiva, prove. And the wall caved in. And the rabbis shook, got a little upset, so the wall stopped. And they said, sorry, it's not a good proof. So he said, there is a stream of water coming down, let it go upwards, opposite. And it started going upwards. And the rabbi says, not good enough. Then he says, let the heavens prove that the ruling is in my favor. And a heavenly voice came and says, my children, why do you debate Rabbi Eliezer, whose ruling is always followed his opinion? And Rabbi Yehoshua, who is the counterpart of Rabbi Eliezer, got up and banged on the table, and he says, we do not accept the Torah in heavens. The Torah is given here on earth, and we have established a law, a rule, that you follow majority. Majority ruled against Rabbi Eliezer, and therefore the ruling is against Rabbi Eliezer. And the Gemara and the Talmud says that up in heaven they changed their mind. The law was always Rabbi Eliezer is the final say. The heavenly court changed because of because of the ruling that took place. They had to excommunicate Rabbi Eliezer for the rest of his life. We studied that in great details. Another story is there was a dispute in heavenly court regarding a color that appears on the skin. It's called discoloration. There are 4 shades of white that deems the person impure and he has to leave the community. There was a dispute about if one came and then it changed. If it was bright white like snow, and then it changed to an off-white like the wool of a sheep the first day it was born. That's a second shade, but it's a little lighter. It's less bright. The question is, if it changed from brighter to lighter, or vice versa, what are the rules? Is it still impure or it's considered pure? And they are disputing up in heaven. God's heavenly court are disputing it. And they said, the only one who can rule is somebody from here, from earth. So let's find the one that is an authority on these colors. And the name is Rabbi Bar Chana. Rabbi, the son of Bar Chana. And there is a whole story how they were able to trick to take him back because he was studying Torah. The angel of death couldn't take him so simply, but after he took him, when he died, he shouted, pure, pure, meaning the ruling is that it's pure. And the heavenly court decided based on the ruling of these men here on earth. In other words, the Torah is not just assisting us in living a life that God wants us. And God said, you eat this type of food. And God says, do not engage in that activity. Torah does not only gives us the ability to become part of God, but Torah also affects this universe and affects the spiritual worlds as well. And here is one more story. There was the 3rd Lubavitcher Rebbe. They had a dedication for the synagogue, and he was invited. Usually he would not show up to public affairs, but he came in. When he came in, they saw that he was very happy. And when everybody was seated, the Rebbe got up and said, it's an auspicious time now. Would you like a Torah teaching or would you like a story? And the Hasidim realized if the Rebbe is asking, it's something important about the story. So they said, we would like to hear a story. And he said, not long ago, there lived a pious man who was a businessman, and he leased a tavern from another Jew. And that's how he made his living. He was a very good, kind-hearted person, loved God, served God, and lived a good life. The problem was he couldn't afford to pay for the lease. The 2 years' time came and he didn't pay. The landlord came to him and says, I need the money. I also have a mortgage to pay. I also have a wife and children. If you're not paying, I'm going to kick you out. Being that they're both Hasidim of a Rabbi Israel of Ruzhin, a famous Rabbi, the renter, the leaser, decided to go to the Rabbi and ask for help. He told the Rabbi that he has no money and he needs help. The Rabbi says, send me the landlord. The landlord came and the Rabbi said to him, look, you have to be a little extra kind, go the extra mile. He doesn't have money. He's an honest man. He's not doing, he has no saving. He's not buying Bitcoins. He's not investing in the stock market. Be nice to him, be patient. And the man says, if the Rebbe is asking, sure. So he didn't ask him, he didn't bother him for the lease. 2 years go by, and the lease is up again. The story is the same story. So the renter goes to the Rebbe, his only refuge. And he says, Rebbe, he wants to kick me out, but that's the only way I support my family, except I can't pay the rent. Can you help? Can you talk to him? And the Rebbe said, sure, send him over. He goes back to his village. He told the landlord, the Rebbe wants to see you. And he came to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe says, please have mercy on him. Give him a break. He is actually working hard. He's trying his best. And you can do an act of kindness. And the man turned to the Rebbe and he says, sorry. You know, last time I did it, that was one time. I can't afford to do it again. This is no business. You know, you got to run a business here. And he walked away from the Rebbe. Life goes on. He died and he goes up to heaven. He was actually a pious man, the landlord. He gave tzedakah. He did not cheat in business. He treated his wife and children nicely. He was part of the community. He studied Torah, except that when his Rebbe asked him to forgive the lease the second time, he said, sorry, business is business. So they decided that they have to. Oh, so his defender said, you guys don't understand the challenge of money. You guys are up in heaven. You have everything you want. You just want ice cream. You got ice cream. You want to go on a cruise. You got it. Over there, you gotta pay, and that's what money is about. You can't just punish the man for making that choice because it's a real, true challenge that you have not faced. So the heavenly court decided that angels cannot decide the fate of the men. Instead, they're going to need to, that's the Rebbe tell the story. Therefore, they need people from earth that lived on earth, souls that lived on earth, and they will hear the two sides and decide, did he do the right thing? He has to pay for, or he has to pay for it. Who are they going to take? They decided to call the Bet Yosef. Bet Yosef is the codifier of Jewish law that lived 500 years ago. He lived in Tzfat, and they had one of his students also wrote commentary to the Code of Law. As they were presiding the case, the defender said, sorry, you can't have someone from 500 years back. This, at the time, it was only 300 years back. You can't have somebody 300 years ago know and understand the challenge of money for today. It's not fair. Their time, money was different than our time. challenges were different. So they decided that they have to find someone from his time. And while they were looking for somebody to preside, they chose me, the Rebbe says. They chose me to preside over the case because I'm still on earth and I'm still facing financial challenges as opposed to souls. So what do you guys think? He turned to the crowd. Should he be meritorious? Should he give him a break? Because what he did is unfortunate, but he does not deserve to be punished or not. And everybody shouted, he is righteous. He is righteous. And the Rebbe says, so the verdict is righteous. This is a story among Hasidim that shows that decisions of ruling, God's ruling, God will decide based on you and I living on earth, even if it affects the soul. And here is one more story for a different dimension. There was a Chassid of the same Rabbi, by the way, the third Rabbi, his name is Rabbi Yosef, who got sick. And the doctors discovered an internal organ that was bad. I don't know what it is. I don't know which part, they didn't say. But the doctors gave him very few months to live. His lungs, his whatever, kidneys, whatever. He was a great scholar. And he went to the Rebbe, and he told the Rebbe that he wants to move to Israel from Ukraine. Why? He says that in Jewish law, in code of law, regarding the law of treif, of non-kosher animal, if the same defect, if the same ailment appears in a cow, there is a dispute between two rulers as to what the condition of the animal. The Beit Yosef, who lived in Israel, said, kosher. The Rama, Rabbi Mose Iserlich, who lived in Krakow is in Poland, rules that it's treif, that it's not kosher. He says, so based on that, I want to move to Israel to live in the community where the ruler is the Beit Yosef, who resided in Israel, and therefore the animal will be kosher. If the animal will be kosher, my body will change and continue living. Did you understand what I said? The third Rebbe, the one I just told you the other story, says to him, I give you a blessing to travel to Israel. He traveled to Israel and he continued living for 20 more years. He died at a very old age, defying all predictions of all doctors. And the way that Hasidim explain is the Torah has ownership of our life. And therefore, the fact that there are two rabbis who are in dispute, Ashkenazic Jews follow the Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Iserlich from Krakow. Sephardic Jews follow Beit Yosef, who lived in Israel. This rabbi lived in Ukraine where the Ramah rules all around. And according to Ramah, it's not kosher. And therefore, he shouldn't, in the same situation in an animal compared to a human, it's the same thing. He shouldn't live that long. Therefore, he moved to a place where Beit Yosef rules that it's kosher, meaning it's not a defect in the animal. The animal can survive very, very much longer and live a normal life. And therefore, it affected his body that he continued living for another 20 years. Because the Torah not only directs us how to serve God and live the way God wants us, the Torah does not connect us to God in a way that nothing else is the same. The Torah gives us the power to affect the spiritual worlds, to change God's mind, to make sure that God's desire is accommodating our decisions based on our study of Torah. Here it is in the text. The rabbi is going to go and talk about the spiritual terminology or Kabbalistic terminology of Sovev and Memale, which we discussed very briefly way before. We're not going to get into details because we will get another opportunity to do that. We are on the bottom of page 315. It must be above all the worlds, since it is their source. In fact, the Torah, God's will, is described as the encompassing all of the world, meaning that it is at a level that cannot become clothed within the worlds, but rather animates and illuminates them as is from a distance, from above, in a transcending and encompassing manner. So we have two types of God's light, two ways. One is that filling in, the other is encompassing. The Torah is all encompassing. The commandments is the memale. And it is this level which transcends all the worlds that is clothed in the truly revealed form in one's soul and his soul garments when he studies Torah. So when I study Torah, I take the all-encompassing power of God that cannot penetrate the universes, but gives them life from around, and it becomes part and parcel of who I am. Even though he does not see it, that is, when one studies Torah, he is unable to consciously experience the unity of his soul with God, which is attained thereby, yet his soul feels it. In fact, this is precisely why we can endure such a unity with God, precisely because he cannot feel it. Unlike the supernal worlds, where godliness is not obscured as it is in this world, and they cannot therefore endure such a unity with God without becoming completely nullified and losing their identities entirely. So, to use an analogy, the king ordered a jeweler to install a very precious stone on top of the crown. The jeweler, realizing that this stone is going to be at the center of the world because all kings are going to look at that, it's going to make it headlines, it's going to be in all official presentations, he couldn't bring himself to install the stone. He was shaking the whole time. He was shaking out of the respect and awe he felt about that stone and what it represents. So what does he do? He was ordered by the king to create the crown. He takes an apprentice who has no idea who the king is, never saw him, because that apprentice is always on social media. He doesn't study. He doesn't know what's going on in politics. Like in today's world, if you ask half the teenagers who is the president and the vice presidents, they have no idea. And he says to him, here is the job. I need you to install that stone and small stones around it. Can you do it? He said, sure. And he does it without hesitation. Why? Because he has no idea what the stone represents and what the stone will become. And therefore, he's able to do it. The spiritual realms are so close and spiritual, connected to God, that God's will and God's desire is so powerful that if it would have a direct connection with them, they will be shaken. They will lose their identity. We don't feel it. My soul feels it. The only reason, says the Rebbe, you can connect to God in such a level is because you have no direct impact. It does not directly impact your body and soul in the way that we feel it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to have that connection. This discussion, I want to finish today this chapter. This discussion of the exalted unity with God attained through Torah study, which is even greater than that accomplished by performing of mitzvot, explains why Torah study is so much loftier than all of the other commandments, including even prayer, which affects unity within the supernal worlds. So you find the Torah tells us, Jewish law tells us, if I study Torah and I need to fulfill a mitzvah, but I'm engrossed in Torah study to a level where I do it my business and live through it all the time, not just this hour, not just today, but my lifetime commitment, I'm exempt from many of the commandments, because the commandments will bring God into making me an extension of God. The Torah makes me become part of God. Therefore, the study Torah is much deeper. Although the law requires of anyone whose Torah study is not his entire occupation, that he interrupt his study for prayer, which would seem to indicate the prayer surpasses Torah study. This is only because he would in any case pause and interpret and interrupt his studies. The Rabbi is saying the reason we stop studying and go and pray is because we stop for anything else. When my wife calls, I stop. When my children call, I stop. When I want to know the stock market, I stop. Therefore, you stop also to pray. But imagine someone who disconnect himself from the phone and his family and says, I want to study, like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, he was hiding in the cave for 12 years with his son. This man did not study Torah, did not need to pray, because he studied Torah. His connection to God was far deeper than the commandments. Thus, it is not the law which caused him to interrupt. The law merely states that the interruption which he would have made regardless be made at the time designated for prayer, and as soon as he interrupts his studies, he is automatically obligated to pray. Says the Rebbe, from this explanation of the lofty stature of Torah study, the wise man will be able to draw upon himself a sense of great awe as he engages in the study of Torah. When he considers how his soul and its garments of thought and speech that are found in his brain and mouth are truly fused in perfect unity with the divine will and the infinite light of the Ein Sof that is manifest in them, that is, in the soul and its garments when he studies Torah. So he becomes part of God. This infinite light manifest in one's Torah study is of such a lofty level that all the upper and lower worlds are truly as naught in comparison with it, and are in fact as absolutely nothing at all, so much so that they can only bear to have a minute glow of it clothed in them without their reverting to nothingness altogether. The main life force which they receive from it, however, is not clothed within them, but animates them from the outside, so to speak, in a transcendent, encompassing manner. So the Rabbi is saying all the other universes connect to God only in an all-encompassing, outside, external. When I study Torah, internal, it becomes part of who I am. The reason I don't feel it is the only way for me to connect to so deep with God. When he considers that the very same divine light that is completely beyond the capacity of all the worlds manifests itself openly in his Torah study, the thinking man will naturally experience a sense of awe when he studies Torah. This is the meaning of the verse. And God commanded us to fulfill all these statutes in order to fear God. So when you study Torah, you have such respect and awe before God that it brings you to connect to God in a much deeper level. The Rabbi is going to talk about different types of fear and awe of God, which is very technical. I'm going to read and then summarize it. But before, I want to explain you. When the Torah talks about love God or fear God, there are two types of fear. There is one fear of punishment. I don't want to be thrown into a fiery pit. I don't want to be thrown off the 18th floor to the ground. I fear. But there is another type of fear. The word fear is incorrect, and that is respect, awe, which create a distance. Both create distance. Love is drawing closer. If I love my children, when I love my spouse, my parents, I want to come closer. I want to spend time with them because I love them. When I love God, I want to be in the presence of God. I want to be close to God. Fear is drawing back. I'm afraid. I fear it's going to hurt me. That's one way. The other type is respect. If I see someone, I revere someone who is so great, I take a step back and I say, I'm not worthy of coming too close to that person or to that entity. And that's what the Rabbi is going to talk about. There are two types, and one would lead to the other However, the ultimate goal is the second one, not the first one. According to this verse, observing the mitzvot would appear to be the first step, and this leads to the fear of God. Logically, however, the performance of God's commandments would seem to be a result of one's fear of Him, and not vice versa. The Alter Rebbe therefore explains that the above verse speaks of a higher level of awe than that which is prerequisite for performance of the commandments. This level can only be attained as a result of one's observance of the commandments. In other words, you fear the punishment and makes you serve God. Once you serve God, you established a relationship and you realize how great God is. Now you have respect for God and awe. Now, if the commandments lead one to a higher level of the fear of God, surely the study of the Torah leads one to a still higher level. This, the Alter Rebbe now discusses. Regarding this great fear, our sages said, if there is no wisdom, there is no fear. In this context, wisdom represents Torah study and fear, the higher level of the awe of God, which can be reached only by way of the Torah. By contrast, the statement, if there is no fear, there is no wisdom, refers to the lower level of fear, which is prerequisite for Torah study, as stated above. In relation to this level of fear, the Torah is called a gateway to the dwelling, that is, the sole means of entering the dwelling. Raise the higher level of fear, as is explained elsewhere. Well, the Rabbi, again, this is the Rabbi is going to a deep Kabbalah discussion. We need to be motivated to serve God. Once we're motivated to serve God and we go deeper, now we create a respect and awe of God, and that's what Torah creates. When I study Torah, because God commanded me to do that, and I want to serve God, once I study Torah and discover that God's essence is enclosed in me, internalized in me, that respect, great respect and awe of God, how great He is to gift me such a special gift. But not every mind, however, can sustain such a fear, yet even though he whose mind cannot bear such a fear, nor even a minute part of it, because the root of the source of his soul derived from an inferior level, the lower gradations of the 10 sefirot of the world of Asiya. Even he should not be deterred by the actual performance of the Torah and the mitzvot for want of their fear, as will be explained further. And that concludes our chapter. So again, in chapter 23, the Rabbi explained the distinction between mitzvot and Torah. Mitzvot are a chariot, God's body parts that serve God's desire. Torah is God's desire. When I study Torah, I bring internally the essence of God, which cannot emanate and that cannot be internalized in any of spiritual universes, realms, souls, angels, only in a physical human body and a soul. The reason we don't feel it is that's the only prerequisite for us to be able to have that established connection. Next week, next lesson, the Rabbi is going to talk about sin. What happens if a person commits a sin? How will that affect his relationship with God and the destruction of the channel that was established between a human and soul and God? And thank you very much. I have nobody. You're welcome.